welcome back to the Wise Duke Podcast. I'm your host, and here I am with Lucy Valesky, and we're going to talk about the Oscars, which are this Sunday, surprisingly, and they came up quite fast. What are your initial thoughts on, the nominees?
I think we have a lot of the films that have been that are nominated for a lot are expected to win. There's a ton for Irishman, not Parasite, it's only 6, but Irishman, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and the most goes to Joker, which those are surprising picks for me because none of those 4 were really my top picks, which my favorites were Little Women and Parasite.
I enjoyed Little Women, but Joker is the most surprising because I enjoyed it, but it wasn't my favorite.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't say, only go for, the most original, but it's not necessarily the most original.
Yeah, I thought that the story wasn't that original, the themes and the central ideas weren't that original, the directing was very, Scorsese-esque, I think I would have enjoyed it more if it didn't have so much hype surrounding it.
Yeah.
I also expected it to be super, controversial and interesting, and it really wasn't that much more violent or riveting than any of the other
superhero or DC movies that we've seen.
Really.
So starting off with, I'm not going to go too deep into the first 8 or 10 nominees, or awards, I should say, but because some of these are very expected. So first up is original song. Nominated is Toy Story 4, Rocketman, Breakthrough, Frozen 2, and Harriet. So I think some definite contenders are Rocketman and Toy Story 4 and Frozen 2, but I haven't seen Frozen 2, I'll confess that. But I really liked Rocketman and Toy Story 4 overall. Those were really good. But I see either Toy Story 4, Rocketman, or maybe Harriet, I don't know. Because I think just the general themes of the Civil War and the Underground Railroad are very popular with the Academy. But I kind of want Toy Story 4 Rocketman. So I think, because Rocketman was an interesting... Because I was comparing them to Rocketman to Bohemian Rhapsody, and Bohemian Rhapsody kind of fell flat on some points, but Rocketman was more of it's more fun. You know what I'm saying? It was more of an interesting take on Elton John's life compared to Freddie Mercury's. So, both are very kind of in this new kind of LGBTQ identity crisis per se, or where everyone's trying to find who they are in this world that's ever changing. Interesting films with similar themes, but Rocketman I think was more interesting. So
I also definitely preferred Rocketman. Song-wise, I was definitely more of a sucker for kind of the Disney power ballad Into the Unknown. Yeah. But I would really like to see the Oscar go to Edgerton and Elton John, just because I thought Taron Egerton gave a fantastic performance, and I thought he was really
good because he got the you mentioned in your article that he got the best actor for comedy or musical, which was well deserved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I was kind of surprised because that meant he did beat Leonardo DiCaprio at the Golden Globes, and he wasn't even nominated, and neither was Rocketman for any other category this year, so I would very much like to see the award go to that film because I thought it was fantastic.
Next up is makeup and hairstyling, and we have Bombshell, Joker, Judy, which is about Judy Garland, Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, and 1917. Makeup, I don't want to gloss over this one too much, but, you mentioned an interesting fact in your article, which I'm probably going to refer to a lot, is the fact that it was Margot Robbie and whoever else were transformed into the Fox News anchors, which is an interesting fact.
And Nicole Kidman.
Right. I haven't seen Judy. I think it might be interesting, but hairstyling, I don't know what they've done, so I can't compare it. 1917, I don't really know. I wouldn't say there's a lot to critique makeup-wise, so Maleficent, I don't know. I don't think that'll get anything. But Joker, it's comparing I felt myself I thought Joker might get it, but I think the way I believe that is because they're using a lot of makeup, not necessarily good makeup. Yeah. So Bombshell could win, but
yeah, my pick is definitely Bombshell. If you look at pictures of even Charlize Theron transformed into Megyn Kelly, and they do look very similar. And I think all of the everyone in the entire movie really you could see it rooted in kind of that Fox News makeup that you do see in news anchors a lot. So I thought it was pretty strong, and I don't think they'll award Bombshell in any other categories, and I think they probably will in this one.
That'll be something interesting that they'll pick up, even though we've heard it wasn't a good movie. But Next up is sound editing. So we have Ford v Ferrari, Joker, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and for future reference, I'll just call that Hollywood because it's a bit of a lengthy title, and then Star Wars. So, sound editing wise, I don't think Hollywood's gonna get it. 1917 maybe. That's interesting because the way the soundscape kind of put you in World War One, which is really interesting. Joker, I don't really think so, but the music for Joker, which I'll touch upon later, was really good. Ford v Ferrari, I have to rewatch that if I want to pay attention to the sound and all that, because that was interesting with the Le Mans, the whole race and all that. Star Wars maybe, but I don't know. I think it's 1917. That's what I think.
It really comes down to Ford versus Ferrari and 1917. I think for both the sound editing and the sound mixing categories, it's really going to come down to either one. I think either 1917 could take both. I think Ford versus Ferrari could take both. I think 1917 could take both or one or the other. I think 1917 had all the bullets and the war sounds and all that kind of thing.
Was really cool.
And then Ford versus Ferrari kind of had all the car sounds, if we want to simplify it. But yeah, I think Ford versus Ferrari, a lot of its wins are going to come from the Le Mans sequences. But yeah, I think my bet would be on either one of those.
And for sound mixing, it's the same people, except instead of Star Wars, it's Ad Astra, which I don't think really has a chance of sound mixing. So again, I think sound mixing will go to 1917.
Yeah.
Next up, we have visual effects, which is nominated Avengers Endgame, The Irishman, Lion King, 1917, and Rise of Skywalker. For visual effects, The Irishman, when walking into it, I forgot that De Niro was visually de-aged, and so I should have thought about that more, but I was a bit confused because he looked like the same age throughout. So I really don't think The Irishman has much of a chance. But it's interesting that the fact that they tried to do that, which is interesting.
I think
Robert De Niro and The Irishman.
One of the reasons I actually didn't like The Irishman personally was I thought the de-aging was a little bit distracting. I thought sometimes his face looked off and his eyes were weird, and I think he moved like an older person, and all the characters kind of moved older, so their face was just kind of threw me off and took me out of it. So it was new technology, so I could see it getting awarded for using totally new technology that hasn't been used before. But it would not be my personal pick. I think my pick would be Ford versus Ferrari because there are just so many quick, really fast cuts.
I don't think Ford v Ferrari is nominated for visual effects.
Oh, no, it's not nominated for visual. Oh, it's for editing. Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Visual effects. What else? I don't know. I think Endgame might get it just because of but it's used a ton. But I don't know. I think it's Endgame. That's my prediction. So because it's usually the big Disney or Marvel one that gets the visual effects snag. Right. Because I think it was when Lone Ranger came out, they got it. So
yeah.
But we'll have to see. Next up is production design. I really liked all of them, but they're Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Parasite, 1917, and Hollywood. A lot of them did really well. 1917, I thought that was really cool because they stitched together several takes of one long continuous take that felt like you were just in one long continuous path of France in the year of 1917. My bad. And that was really fascinating the way they set it up, because I'll talk about the cinematography as well because they used a model for that. So I thought that was interesting to show the ruined village or the trenches even. So that was really fascinating. But I feel it could either go to 1917 or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah, production design for me is a 3-horse race. I think it could easily go to Parasite because I think the house in Parasite in the city,
that's really cool.
It was a really important part of the story, and it was a really it was kind of a character on its own. So I could definitely see it going to Parasite, but I think it could be 1917 or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was obviously a transformed older Hollywood, which was really interesting. And then 1917 was just so immaculate, and everywhere the screen turned, you saw different pieces of war, I guess. So I
Parasite,
thought it was,
like you said, the house, that was fascinating, and also the slums where the family lived.
Yeah,
that was interesting because once it started raining and flooding, you could tell because they were living in the lower parts of wherever they were living. So that was fascinating.
Yeah.
But Quentin Tarantino's crazy with his production design, and I've seen some the behind the scenes, and it's fascinating the way he picks out specific cars and says I want that one, or I've actually driven past the Cinerama theater that you just see a quick shot of. So it's purely fascinating how he shuts down lot of LA for like 60s Hollywood. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, I think it could be those three. I think it's between those three. If I had to pick one right now, I would say 1917, but I definitely wouldn't be surprised if any three of those got it.
Next up is film editing. So we have Ford v Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, and Parasite. So I think, like you said, Ford v Ferrari, like the quick cuts and the way they've stitched it together is fascinating.
Yeah.
So
Especially for the Le Mans, I think, like I said, I think a lot of its awards will come from the Le Mans sequence in itself. The other one I really liked was Jojo Rabbit. It was very
good.
like in your face, like the whole movie was very like close up shots, and I thought it was interesting. Parasite was just very sleek, which I also really liked. Like it was just so clean, and every shot meant something, and every cut meant something to the story. So my pick would be Parasite again because I really enjoyed that movie.
That blew my mind when I saw it.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I was so like stunned by that.
Yeah.
That the way they cut it together, like with a couple living in the basement, that was really well done.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it could easily go to Parasite.
I think it could easily go to Parasite. My guess is Ford v Ferrari, but yeah, I hope Parasite.
Next up is cinematography. So that's fascinating. We've got The Irishman, Joker, The Lighthouse, which is interesting, 1917, and again, Hollywood. I don't want to say don't want Hollywood to win, but I think it's going to go to 1917 purely because of the fact... Well, I don't say purely because of the fact, but again, it was one shot.
Yeah.
Not one take, and it's also probably one of the most influential cinematographers ever, Roger Deakins. So he's such an interesting cinematographer. Like, he's done Sicario, Skyfall, he's done a few other things with Sam Mendes, so I think it could easily go to 1917 because that was absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, I agree. I liked 1917 cinematography. It was so immersive, so exciting. Joker, it really immersed you in this like 80s New York. It did get old, I thought, after a while, and I didn't like a lot of the cuts or a lot of the shots.
It just felt too grimy. It just felt too New York, too much New York.
I think it was overdone a little bit, and I think it was too much for itself. But I think my pick would be 1917, and that's what I hope wins.
Next up, animated feature films. So we got How to Train Your Dragon, I Lost My Body, Klaus, Missing Link, and Toy Story 4. The only one I've seen is Toy Story 4, but I haven't seen Missing Link, but I know about it more, so... Because I don't know Klaus, I Lost My Body, or How to Train Your Dragon, but Toy Story 4 was really good. Yeah. I think the animation was like very realistic. I'm not saying like a good feature animated film is good if it's realistic, but I just felt that the way they made it look realistic and kind of like didn't like make it too obvious that it was animated was really interesting. So
yeah, I think Toy Story 4 has a very easy chance of winning. It's emotional. It's a fan favorite. It got good ratings. It could easily win. However, this weekend, Klaus won the BAFTA for Best Animated Picture and the Annie for Best.
Interesting.
So I think there's not a clear-cut winner in this category. So I think voters might go for Klaus just because it's winning other things now.
Interesting. Next up is international feature. I don't want to talk about this too much because I think we all know what's going to go to it. So nominated is Corpus Christi from Poland, Honeyland from North Macedonia, Les Miserables from France, Pain and Glory from Spain, and obviously Parasite from South Korea. I've heard about Les Miserables, but I haven't seen it. But I want to see it because it's kind of like an interesting... Because it's not about the musical or the play by Victor Hugo, but it's more of like a modern political thing with the title Les Miserables. So I think that it has a chance, but it definitely, I'm like 90% sure that it's Parasite.
It's going to be Parasite. I loved Pain and Glory. I watched it this weekend, and I loved Pain and Glory, but yeah, it's going to be Parasite. If Parasite wins nothing else, it will win that.
Yeah, this is like a for sure. Like, kind of the way I see cinematography, I think it's definitely going to be 1917.
Yeah.
Next up is the adapted screenplay. So we've got The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Women, and The Two Popes. So The Irishman is based off of a book called The Call You Paid, or I Heard You Paint Houses. I don't know if it's by Frank Sheeran, but it's about Frank Sheeran and Jimmy Hoffa. Jojo Rabbit is based off of Caging Skies. I forget who the author is, but it's about, again, same story. Joker is obviously based off of like the DC Comics. Little Women is based, again, off Little Women and the Two Popes. I actually don't know, but it's based off like the story of Pope Francis and Benedict, I believe.
Yeah, it could have gone either way for original screenplay or adapted. It doesn't have like a original source material, but it is not like an original story. My pick here is Little Women. I really want Little Women to win it. I have been like, I read Little Women when I was younger. I've seen a lot of the Little Women adaptations, and I just think what Greta Gerwig did with this, I'm wearing my Greta Gerwig shirt today. What Greta Gerwig did with the script was she changed it so it still honored the classic Little Women story, but it kind of changed it so it's more modern and inventive for the message we need today in 2020 now. I do think it could go to Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah, I think those are the top two contenders. It was Jojo Rabbit. I was watching an interview between, not an interview, but like scene design or something like that. It was between Taika Waititi and Stephen Merchant, who plays the Gestapo agent. And when he received the script, he was like, "Oh no, it's another director with like his imaginary Hitler script." Yeah. But I mean, I don't know if that's too popular, but it definitely seems like it's a common idea that everyone goes to. But it was a very creative, and it was really well executed the way they kind of put the caricature of Adolf Hitler into Johannes' mind. So that was fascinating. So again, I think it could go either way with Little Women or Jojo Rabbit.
Yes, I agree.
And now that we've done adapted screenplay, I'd like to move on to original screenplay, which is Knives Out, Marriage Story, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. These are all high contenders. However, just to dismiss a few, I think 1917 was interesting, but it didn't really have much dialogue. Yeah. So I can kind of fell flat on the writing was good, but like it wasn't like very, very creative or very like fascinating writing. Yeah. So I think Knives Out was an interesting screenplay. That was interesting the way that Ryan Johnson did it's this new whodunit or murder mystery. Or it could definitely go to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or even Parasite. I mean, those are the top three. Yeah. So.
I would say Parasite and Marriage Story would be my two top picks because I would really like to see Marriage Story win something besides Laura Dern later on. But Marriage Story, I would really like to see it win because it was really script heavy. It was really beautifully written. But Parasite also had an amazing story that was super inventive, so many twists and turns, really well written. It was comedic at times, it was a drama at times, it was horror at times, like it was all over the place, but it was fantastic. I do think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has been picking up a lot of wins. Right, yeah. So I think it's between Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Parasite, but I'd be more happy to see Parasite. But I like Once Upon a Time
Marriage Story too. That was very like pure emotion, so I think the writing in that was very strong. Yeah. But I don't think the Oscars like giving awards out to Netflix movies, which is unfortunate because Noah Baumbach is a great director. But also Tarantino's writing is interesting. I think there's a lot of memorable lines from the movie, and there's just a lot of interesting dialogue between all the characters. Like one scene that I always adore is the scene between I forget the character's name, but Julia Butters, the young actress on the set of Lancer, and Leonardo DiCaprio plays Rick Dalton, which is very interesting to kind of banter the interplay between the two, which is really interesting. So that was an interesting scene, the way they talk about like both books that they're reading.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very like rich, like all the dialogue between the characters. Like you can say what you want about like the first 2 hours between the different characters, between Cliff Booth, who was Brad Pitt's character, and Leonardo DiCaprio's Rick Dalton, between that like little girl and Rick Dalton. And it was really interesting to see these like really interesting, I guess if we want to use the same word. And even the whole
Spahn scene, that was interesting with Cliff going to Spahn Ranch and talking to George Spahn and being like kind of intimidated by all the Manson family. So that was interesting. Their characters were built really well.
Yeah. And then the end twist I thought just how the whole movie was structured was just really, really cool and interesting. And I don't want to throw around big words, but I thought it was brilliant. But I could see it going there. But Parasite's my first pick.
Yeah, that story was just unbelievable. Yeah. I just am still shocked. Like, it was pure adrenaline, like, the entire time. Like,
Yeah.
once I saw that it was the brother who was tutoring the girl, and then it was
The sister.
the sister who was doing the art tutoring. So
Yeah, it just
that was
kept
interesting. I was like,
twist
once I
after
saw that
twist.
both of them were like helping the family, I was like, something's up.
Yeah.
And then like once it just started to unravel, evolve, and change, it was just so.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of it. I gotta see it again. But again, like you said, the character interactions in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, those are big contenders. So I think it's either Parasite or Hollywood. But I do like Marriage Story. But again, it's a Netflix, so I don't think it's gonna get it. But next up is directing. So that's interesting. Although it's not usually evident or not, it's hard to tell for the audience from the audience's perspective, like what kind of directions the director has given to the actors and what kind of direction they've taken is hard to tell. But anyways, nominated is Martin Scorsese for The Irishman, Todd Phillips for The Joker, Sam Mendes in 1917, Tarantino for Hollywood, and Bong Joon-ho for Parasite. So there's a lot to get through in each of those because there's a lot of really good directors out there in this selection.
Yeah.
But Scorsese's been, he's been here forever, so I think that's a definite contender. But 1917 got some good stuff at the BAFTAs and also the Golden Globes. So not Todd Phillips, Sam Mendes could definitely take home this award, but also Tarantino could, or even Bong Joon-ho. Like, did Bong Joon-ho get Best Director at the Golden Globes? I forget.
No, it was Mendes.
It was Mendes,
Golden
but
Globes,
yeah. But that was interesting. So I think they all could take it home, but it'd be interesting.
My prediction is Mendes. I would be very excited to see Bong Joon-ho win because he was
that would be
fantastic.
good. He was good.
I thought Scorsese, it was beautifully
Typical.
done. It was very Scorsese. Like, it was, I didn't think
I mean, he
it
always
stood
does
out.
mob
Yeah.
films, so I think it's very typical of Scorsese. So I don't know.
Yeah.
He might have a chance, but since everyone, he's done like Goodfellas and a lot of other movies.
Yeah.
But I think 1917's got Sam Mendes has got a very good chance. Bong Joon-ho does as well. Tarantino maybe, but I think just people are drawn to Tarantino naturally. But I definitely think it's Mendes or Joon-ho.
Yeah. Todd Phillips is very Scorsese-esque, but I don't think he
I think
does
he's
it as
trying
well.
to make something good, but it doesn't come out as good as some people expected it to be.
Yeah.
So, moving on from that to some of the more, not saying that directing isn't important, but the more awards of the night is supporting actor. So we have Tom Hanks as Mr. Rogers, Anthony Hopkins, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, and Brad Pitt. Now, Brad Pitt of the Golden Globes took home the award for Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that Pesci and Al Pacino were kind of on the same level for The Irishman because, again, they're all these big mobsters in the 70s. So that'll be fascinating. But, I don't know. I think it could go either to Pacino, Pitt, or Pesci. I don't...
My pick is Pitt. He was my very favorite in this
Yeah,
category. He hasn't won an Oscar before for acting. He also was in Ad Astra this year where he was fantastic.
That was interesting.
Pesci and Pacino, I would pick... who was Russell? Which one was... Russell was Pacino, right? Or no, Pesci.
I think it was Pesci, yeah.
Okay, so Pesci would be my pick. I thought Al Pacino was good. He was a little over the top sometimes. But I would pick between Pesci and Brad Pitt, but Brad Pitt was ultimately my favorite. And
his portrayal of, I can't say Cliff Booth is a real person, but his kind of characterization of this stuntman that Tarantino created was really interesting and kind of like this interesting view. So I think it was kind of a bit comedic in some ways, but also he was a very good character.
Yeah,
so.
he won the SAG, he won the Golden Globes, he won BAFTA, so I think he has a very strong chance.
Next up is supporting actress, and we've got Kathy Bates from Richard Jewell, Laura Dern as the attorney in Marriage Story, Scarlett Johansson in Jojo Rabbit, Florence Pugh in Little Women, and Margot Robbie in Bombshell. I want to go right away and dismiss Margot Robbie in Bombshell, not because I don't like it, but I think just Bombshell, I didn't see it, but I've heard bad things about it. So
I liked Bombshell, and I thought Margot Robbie was a really strong performance
Really?
in Bombshell. Yeah, me and my friend both cried twice because of her performance in that movie. I don't think she'll win, but I definitely think she did. It was a very Margot Robbie, like, over the
Yeah.
top, like, big character choices performance. So I don't think it'll win. I think it was strong. I don't think. I think we
Right.
can dismiss Kathy Bates. Would be my
right,
dismissal.
because I don't think that didn't get too much excitement, but I mean, it's still an interesting film that I want to see. But I'm very surprised that Robbie did not get nominated as for Sharon Tate, which is interesting because I think she did really well as Sharon Tate. But
I don't think she had as many enough screen time or lines.
that's
or
true,
anything
yeah.
in
Because
that
Tarantino
category.
definitely got critiqued at the Cannes Film Festival for like not putting her on screen as much. But it's not really about Tate. It's more about Dalton and Booth.
Yeah.
It's Manson murders and Tate are merely a backdrop to this ever-changing Hollywood.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
who this really could go to? I think it could go to Scarlett Johansson or Laura Dern.
Yes, I think it's going to be Laura Dern ultimately. Florence Pugh, she had a fantastic performance in Midsommar. I thought she transformed the character of Amy in Little Women to be maybe my favorite character in the movie. Besides, obviously, Joe is the favorite,
Right.
Always. So my pick is my favorite's Florence Pugh personally. Just I really liked Midsommar and I really liked Little Women. It was my favorite of the year. But I do think it's ultimately going to be Dern because
She played a really interesting character and kind of mean character in Marriage Story, so
Yeah.
I think that's going to kind of put her on the top. But Scarlett Johansson's character has somewhat of an interest, but I think Dern's going to get it.
Yeah, I think so.
Next up is supporting actor, and we have, who do we have? Leading actor. Antonio Banderas in Pain and Glory, Leo DiCaprio in Hollywood, Adam Driver in Marriage Story, Joaquin Phoenix in Joker, and Jonathan Pryce in The Two Popes. So, I haven't seen Pain and Glory, I'll again confess, there's a few that I haven't seen, but I liked DiCaprio's acting in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, kind of playing this has-been actor, as he calls himself, and who... It's just a really fascinating character, but also Adam Driver, he did a really emotional portrayal of... What was his character's name? I forget.
Charlie.
Charlie, that's it.
Yeah.
In Marriage Story, which I felt was really good. So, but Joaquin Phoenix won the Golden Globe for Joker, which was interesting. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix and Adam Driver both have very convincing and interesting performances, but I want Adam Driver to win, but I think
Yeah.
it's ultimately going to go to Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, my favorite performance was Antonio Banderas. I just watched it this weekend. I thought he was super subtle, like super... It's a story all about, like, kind of turning your pain into glory, like turning the pain you felt into, like, art and being able to use it, like, your pain to create art that can ultimately save you. And I don't know. His performance I thought was breathtaking. It was my favorite of the year. I would also really like to see Adam Driver. I think he was really, like, gave a really emotional, like, performance that was, like, really interesting. I ultimately did get on Charlie's side in the movie, and I think that's due to his performance partially. I think it'll go to Joaquin Phoenix ultimately just because it was such a transformative, such a physical and emotional performance.
Right.
I thought it lacked a little bit of depth. I didn't really see any internal struggle at any point.
Right.
But I think it's also time for him to win because he's been doing a lot of good performances over the years. So
Yeah, his portrayal of Arthur Fleck was interesting because he lost a lot of weight, which was, you know, I mean, actors do like gain or lose weight a lot, but especially for this role, just the whole build and just the whole characterization of the Joker was interesting. The way he did
exactly. I think the biggest snub in this category for me was Taron Egerton, as I mentioned earlier.
That, yes, I can definitely agree with that. He did a really good performance of Elton John, and I can definitely agree with that 100%. Next up from leading actor is leading actress, and we have Cynthia Erivo from Harriet, who portrays Harriet Tubman herself, Scarlett Johansson in Marriage Story, Saoirse Ronan in Little Women, Charlize Theron in Bombshell, and Renee Zellweger in Judy, who portrays Judy Garland. So, Saoirse Ronan was interesting in Little Women, but I don't really know. There's no, like, big I mean, some of them might be big contenders, but what are your thoughts?
Renee Zellweger, she won the SAG, she won the Golden Globe, Critics' Choice, BAFTA. It's It's going to be, I think it'll ultimately end up going to her. I think Scarlett Johansson could be a good pick because of Marriage Story's not really getting as much hype for specific awards, but it does have some love, and I think she didn't even have as much screen time as Adam Driver.
I know,
but
they definitely didn't put her on because we mostly saw Charlie going around to different lawyers and them telling you, oh, I can't do this for you, this is too much money, and Scarlett Johansson's like, they're portraying her as this villain, saying, oh, that's the trick she pulls, saying that she goes around to the lawyers because you can't do other lawyers like your partners talk to in actual divorce laws.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
I think Saoirse was again, I love Little Women, so Saoirse had to be my pick just because I thought her performance in Joe was, you kind of saw her growing up and how she matured and learned that she had to choose different, like that she wanted to get married, but she also needed to pursue her dream of being a writer. And I just thought like the evolution through this character's life, she was beautifully done.
Yeah, her character was interesting as well as like going to the writer and then like the guy like crossing out the page and saying, you can't do this, this doesn't, this isn't up to societal standards, women can't be these, major characters because those were like the standards of the time.
Yeah.
So I think her kind of not necessarily fighting against that, but also kind of, again, like you said, either marrying or pursuing her dream, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So, now on to the most coveted award of the night, Best Picture. So up we have Ford vs. Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. Now, these are all really good movies, I'll tell you that. But some of them are much better than others.
Yes.
So my top picks are like Marriage Story, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Jojo Rabbit, and Parasite.
Yes.
So I think 1917, that won the best like drama for Golden Globes because they divided up into comedy, musical, and drama.
Yeah.
So that is a shot at winning Best Picture, which I think I don't say easily could win, but it could win.
Yeah.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, could also win, but it's because it's Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
The Irishman, I don't know. Again, I really liked it, but again, it to some extent it kind of fell flat and didn't achieve as much success as some others. Jojo Rabbit in general, I felt it was very creative with the way they did it, but Parasite was much more breathtaking.
Yeah.
So looking at the nominees list, I was very surprised to see it was on the Best Picture list. Not because of its quality, but just the fact that it's international, and they don't typically nominate international movies for Best Picture. But what they did for Roma last year. But I think Parasite is a really good shot.
I do too. My favorite was Little Women. It's not gonna win, sadly, but it was my favorite. I think. What else? Ford vs. Ferrari, again, that one's not going to win. It was kind of a surprise nomination in this category, so I don't think it really has a chance. It doesn't have any acting nominations or anything. Irishman, I think it started the season really strong. I think it didn't really pick up any wins throughout the season in acting.
Yeah, it didn't get much Golden Globes. It didn't get any Golden Globes, if I recall.
No Golden Globes. So I just don't really see it. JoJo... it's a really feel good movie.
Yeah.
And I think that, and it's really funny and as sad, and I think it kind of goes along the same central themes of Green Book, that one last year, of turning a racist person into a not racist person. So I think that, and it kind of had similar controversy, so I think it could see it winning. Joker, I don't want it. It was my least favorite film out of these, and I don't think it will. Marriage Story, I'm not expecting it to, just because it's Netflix. It's not, it's not like that transformative or, it's original, but not like anything we've seen before. But it's not as, I just don't see it, and it hasn't won over the season. 1917, and the three that I think have the strongest chance would be 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite.
Yeah, those are the biggest.
Has been picking up the most wins, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as we're calling it, and Parasite, I think both could sneak in and win, and I wouldn't be too surprised. I think it's what happens earlier in the awards show that will determine.
Yeah. And also, there's an interesting not quote, but kind of line from Bong Joon-ho that he shared at the Golden Globes, which was interesting. He said, like, you'll start to enjoy, like, foreign movies more once you overcome the 2-inch barrier of subtitles. So I felt that was really touching. So I think Parasite is definitely some good shots.
Yeah.
Same with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and 1917. But there's a few that are the underdogs. So they definitely have a good shot. And we'll see what happens on Sunday.
Yes.
So thank you for listening.